2 billion people own a book written by his brother. Almost none of them know it. For 2,000 years, the world has been arguing about Jesus of Nazareth. His name has echoed in cathedrals and prison cells, in the last words of the dying and the first prayers of children. We think we know him, in a real house, in a forgotten town. We know their names. We have their words. We can trace their footsteps from a carpenter's workshop in Nazareth all the way to a Roman execution order. This is their story. Nazareth was not a prestigious address, a village of no more than 400 people, so insignificant it appears in no Roman record, no Jewish text, no map of the ancient world outside the New Testament. When Nathanael hears the Messiah is from Nazareth, his response is immediate. Can anything good come from there? Joseph was a tekton, translated carpenter, but more accurately, a craftsman who worked stone as much as wood, a builder. When Mary and Joseph presented Jesus at the temple as an infant, they offered 2 doves, not a lamb. That was the offering permitted for those who could not afford a lamb. This family lived at the lower edge of working class. Jesus was the eldest. After him came James, Yaakov in his native tongue, likely 2 or 3 years younger. Then Joseph, called Joses, a nickname like calling him Joey to distinguish him from his father. Then Simon. Then Judas, Yehuda, who history would call Jude. And then the sisters. The 4 Gospels never name them, but early Christian tradition did. The 4th century bishop Epiphanius of Salamis, drawing on extra-canonical tradition outside the 4 Gospels, tracing back through sources that claimed apostolic roots, preserved 2 names not found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, Salome and Mary. The Gospel of Philip, a 3rd century text, independently preserves the name Mary as a sister of Jesus. These names appear in non-canonical sources from the 3rd and 4th centuries, outside the biblical record entirely. They are not biblical names. They are the names early Christian tradition refused to let disappear. We cannot treat these names with the same weight as the 4 Gospels. But the early church preserved them because the early church believed they were real. And we will meet Salome again. At a moment, the brothers were not there. To understand why the siblings doubted Jesus, you have to understand the world they lived in. 1st century Galilee was an honor-shame culture, a society where a family's public reputation was its most valuable possession. Your honor was your family's honor. Your shame was your family's shame. They were not separable. In this world, an eldest son who abandoned his family trade and began wandering the countryside, claiming to be the fulfillment of ancient prophecy, was not inspiring. He was a crisis. Every controversy Jesus sparked with the temple authorities, every time he claimed authority over the Sabbath, every time he declared sins forgiven, every time he said, "Before Abraham was, I am," landed directly on his family's reputation back in Nazareth. When Jesus left home to begin his ministry, his departure didn't just leave a vacancy in the workshop. In a society built on honor, it left his siblings exposed. Joseph is present at the beginning, the birth, the flight to Egypt, the temple at 12. Then he vanishes from the record entirely. No death recorded, no farewell. He simply stops appearing. He died, almost certainly while Jesus was still a young man. When the father died, everything fell to the eldest son. Not just the workshop, the family, the younger siblings, the mother. Jesus very likely spent years supporting at least 6 younger dependents with his hands before he left. To the siblings watching from Nazareth, it would have been perceived as desertion. Luke 2 preserves the one childhood moment that survived. The family travels to Jerusalem for Passover. On the return trip, they travel an entire day before realizing Jesus is not with them. They search for 3 days. They find him in the temple, seated among the greatest scholars in Judaism, asking questions so precise the teachers are astonished. Mary confronts him. Jesus answers with a question of his own. "Did you not know? I had to be about my Father's business." Joseph was not in that room. Every sibling in that family heard what Jesus said when he came out. My Father's business, not the carpenter's trade. They would spend the next 20 years watching him. And for a long time, they would get it deeply, dangerously wrong. Mark 6:3 is explicit. Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And aren't his sisters here with us? The Greek word used throughout is adelphos, brother from the same womb. The Greek word for cousin is anepsios. Paul uses it in Colossians 4:10 when he means cousin. Matthew and Mark had the right word available. They chose adelphos. In Koine Greek, adelphos could refer to a biological brother, a stepbrother, or close kin, which is precisely why the 3 traditions we are about to examine all have legitimate standing. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in 93 AD, with no theological stake in Christianity, refers in his Antiquities of the Jews to James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. A simple biographical statement for a Roman audience. No qualification, no debate. In 2002, a limestone bone box, an ossuary, surfaced in Israel with an Aramaic inscription. Yaakov bar Yosef Akui di Yeshua. James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. A 7-year forgery trial, 116 court hearings, over 12,000 pages of transcripts. In 2012, the owner was acquitted of all forgery charges. Geologists confirmed ancient patina inside the very letters of the word Jesus. The court acquitted, but scholarly opinion on the inscription remains divided. What is not divided is this: if authentic, it is the earliest physical artifact in the world directly connected to Jesus of Nazareth. A limestone box that once held the bones of his brother. Here is where the investigation gets complicated. 3 ancient Christian traditions, each with serious scholars, each with centuries of theological weight, look at the same family and arrive at different conclusions. Let us follow each one, where it leads. The first reads the text as it stands. Mark and Matthew chose adelphos, not anepsios. Matthew 1:25 says Joseph did not consummate his marriage with Mary until after Jesus was born, the word until implying what followed. On this reading, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas are the biological children of Mary and Joseph. Along with sisters, the Gospels confirm, but never name. Their names, Salome and Mary, come not from Matthew or Mark, but from early Christian tradition we have already cited. The plain text, the plain meaning. The second tradition stops and says, "Not so fast." At the cross, the worst moment of his life, Jesus looked down and saw his mother. He did not call for James. He did not call for Simon. He gave her to a disciple, a dying Jewish son, who bypassed his own brothers to assign his mother's care to a stranger, was making a statement. Jewish custom demanded biological sons care for a widowed mother. If James and the brothers were her sons, they would have taken her. They did not. On this reading, the siblings were cousins. Mary remained a virgin throughout her life. The entrusting of Mary at the cross is not incidental. It is the evidence. The third tradition says, both of you are missing something. Joseph was older than Mary, already widowed once, already a father. The siblings were his children from that first marriage. Jesus was the youngest in the household, not the eldest. This explains why Joseph disappears from the record early. He was already old when the story began. It is from within this tradition, preserved by Epiphanius and traced back through sources claiming apostolic roots, that the names Salome and Mary were recorded for the sisters. 3 ancient traditions, 3 serious answers. The only thing all of them agree on is this: these people shared a table with Jesus of Nazareth, and in that family, for a time, something had broken down completely. John 7, verse 5, the most quietly devastating sentence in the New Testament. Jesus' brothers are urging him to go public at the Feast of Tabernacles, and John adds this aside, almost parenthetically, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. They had lived with him, watched him for 30 years, heard every claim he made, and arrived at a conclusion. He is our brother. He is not what he says he is. Mark 3:21 goes further. When news reaches the family that Jesus is drawing massive crowds and dangerous controversy, his family went out to seize him. The Greek krateo, to take hold of, to arrest. The reason? They believed he was out of his mind. Not dangerous, not evil, just unwell. They were going to bring their brother home, and here, the honor-shame dimension cuts to the bone. In a society where reputation was survival, having a brother the temple authorities were publicly calling a blasphemer was not a private worry. It was a public catastrophe. James and his brothers were not just worried, they were exposed. He answers them with words that would have cut through any family. Who is my mother? Who are my brothers? He gestures to his disciples. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. He had expanded the definition of family beyond them. Then the crucifixion happened. We do not know where James was when Jesus was arrested. We do not know if he stood at Golgotha. The brothers, every one of them, are absent from every gospel account of the cross. But someone from that household in Nazareth was there. Mark 15:40 names 3 women watching from a distance: Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and Salome. Mark 16:1 names the same Salome again, one of the women who came to the empty tomb at dawn with spices to anoint the body. Salome was at the death. Salome was at the tomb. Most scholars identify her as the mother of the disciples James and John, the wife of Zebedee, but a minority yet ancient tradition, preserved by Epiphanius, whose work we have already cited, believed this Salome was the same Salome named as a daughter of Joseph, a sister of Jesus. Professor James Tabor of the University of North Carolina writes that Salome at the cross was very possibly Jesus' sister. We cannot be certain. The debate is genuine. But consider what this means if the tradition holds. While the brothers were absent, the men who had gone to bring Jesus home, who had publicly doubted him, a woman from that same house in Nazareth may have been standing at the foot of his cross, not looking away, not going home. At the cross, Jesus looked down and saw his mother. He entrusted her, not to his brothers, to a disciple. Woman, behold your son. To the disciple, behold your mother. From that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. The brothers were not there. Then Jesus died. Then he was buried. Then, 3 days later, everything changed. 1 Corinthians 15. Paul is writing within 25 years of the events, when eyewitnesses are still alive. He lists the resurrection appearances, Peter, the 12, more than 500 people at once, the apostles, and then, separately, as if it requires its own line, then he appeared to James. That is all. No explanation, no description. Written as a known fact that needs no defense. The way you mention something everyone in the room already knows. Jesus appeared to James. We do not have James's account of what he saw, but we have Acts 1:14. The same Luke who recorded the family going to seize Jesus because they thought he was out of his mind, now writes that in the days after the resurrection, Mary and the brothers of Jesus were gathered with the disciples, praying together, every one of them. Something happened to James between John 7:5 and Acts 1:14. The only explanation James ever offered was that his brother rose from the dead. James went from doubter to the leader of the Jerusalem church. What happened next changed the ancient world. Part 2 is queued up for you now.